Why don't you come on in and sit down? We're going to get started. For those of you who finished lunch early and are ready, and we'll wait for everyone else to join us. They'll just have to join us as we're in process. So I'm Dr. Sharon Stills, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Raving fans in the corner over there. And so, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? It's on, yeah. How do you hear me now? Better? Good in the back? Okay. So I'm still Dr. Sharon Stills, and we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about natural ways to detoxify your biological terrain. Some of what I have to say you may have heard before, but it's always good to hear things. It's interesting to me as I listen to all the other presenters and I go, oh, I'm going to talk about that. Oh, I'm supposed to talk about that. But we all have a different slant and a different way of saying it, so maybe you hear it from one person, don't hear from another. And it's always good to hear this time and time again until it really sinks in. And so, okay, so first of all, how do you know you're toxic? Well, ask yourself, am I alive? And if you answered yes, then you are toxic. If you asked yourself if you're alive and you said no, then we have a totally different issue going on, and that won't be addressed during this talk. But the sad truth is that if you are alive, you are dealing with toxins in your body. And so we're going to talk about, just because you have toxins in your body, we're all different, we all have different constitutions, and they affect us differently. And so say we're all sitting here in this room and someone drops a mercury thermometer and it breaks on the floor and mercury is exposed to us. Some of us may end up very sick from that exposure, we may end up with MS. Others of us who are better detoxifiers, we may not have a major issue because we may have the right liver function and glutathione production, and we may be able to detoxify much more easily. So just because you're alive and you're faced with toxins, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It's just you need to be aware and you need to know how you detoxify and to have a real good consciousness of it, because unfortunately, in this day and age, our Earth is getting more toxic and more toxic as we go on. So by age 10, a child born in 2000 is exposed to approximately 80,000 chemicals that didn't even exist in 1970. And so that's just really depressing. And I'm not going to give you a bunch of statistics like that, because often when I go to environmental conferences, they just bombard us with all these really sad statistics, and you walk out of there feeling really depressed and hopeless. And so what I'd like to offer you today is awareness and then some tools, some that are very easy that you can just start right away to help you learn how to lessen your toxic load. And so when we think about, being alive, so it does start at birth. Umbilical cord blood was tested in 2005 in 10 babies, and they were exposed to approximately 200 toxins. So this is starting at birth, and it's actually starting in the womb. So Henny had mentioned it before, and it's true. When we are pregnant, if we have a toxic load of mercury, our babies act as fantastic chelators. And so what happens is our babies take the mercury from us. So we end up lessening our mercury load, but we end up giving it to our babies. And so obviously as a mother, that's not something we want to do. In addition, if we don't support our adrenal glands when we are pregnant, then our babies, when the third trimester starts, our babies will produce cortisol, and if we don't have our own cortisol production, then we will take the cortisol from our babies. So then our babies have the opportunity to be born hypoadrenic, not have proper adrenal function, and be loaded with mercury. So it's really important in my practice when I see women who are of childbearing age that I talk to them about this, and we do preconception counseling and preconception detoxification. So that's something to think about. So the first thing I want to talk about is your personal backpack. And so when we talk about constitution and whether or not we are good detoxifiers, I like to use the idea of a backpack. And so I like to say we're all born with a backpack. Some of us, like myself, are born with tiny little backpacks. Others of us are born with these big, robust backpacks, and we have much stronger constitution. And so what if you're born with a little backpack? It means that the littlest of toxic exposure fills your backpack really quickly. And then what happens is your backpack overflows when you get more toxic exposures. And these toxic exposures are not just from the environment. They're from the thoughts we think. They're from the food we eat. They're from all sorts of things. And so when we get our backpack full, we then begin to have symptoms. So someone who's born with a large backpack, they can eat foods that they're sensitive to. They can be exposed to mercury. They can be exposed to pesticides. And maybe they're not going to become symptomatic, at least not as early in life. So someone like myself, and maybe some of you sitting out here, you have itty-bitty backpacks and you grew up very sick. And that's how I got into this. I was very, very sick as a child, suffering with asthma and allergies that would send me to the hospital, put me in oxygen tents. I couldn't even walk outside if they were cutting the grass without ending up in the hospital. And so by learning and taking away the things I could take away, like foods that I was sensitive to, lowering the toxic load in my environment and so forth, I was able to make my backpack not overflow by taking away the things I could control. So I want to talk about constitution, because your constitution is something that's really, really important, because all of us are different. And so I'm going to go through a few different ways. I'm not going to do an in-depth discussion on our different constitutions, but I just want to give you an idea, because so often, especially at this time of the year, it's like we're getting towards summer, and it's bikini season, and it's like the latest craze, and everyone's hearing, oh, you need to detoxify, get your beach body, do a juice cleanse, and you know, that's just really superficial stuff, and it's really good marketing, but it really doesn't do anything to really do deep cleansing or affect who you are. So it's important, and there are many different ways, and just like I think in religion, like all roads lead home, and so all of us here, the practitioners, people who see practitioners, there's so many different ways to get to cure and get to healing. And so what's important is to see what resonates with you and to really find out what that is and know who you are. So know what your constitution is. So we're going to talk a little bit about miasm. There's also temperament. Dosha is from the Ayurvedic realm of medicine. 5-element Chinese medicine. I know some of you do that. Mucor, aspergillus, penicillium. For those of you know, I am like the Sanam girl. I grew up on Sanam. It was my first introduction in naturopathic medical school back in 1997, so I've been at this a long time, where I got introduced to European biological medicine. And so Mucor is mucokeel or pleomuc, and aspergillus is pleonig or nigersan. Penicillium is pleonote or notatum. And even within that realm, we have constitutions where Mucor has a lot of circulatory issues. It has to do with circulation in the body. Mucor people can tend to be like heavy. They're more like kapha. They're more, for those of you that practice homeopathy, more of like a calc-carb constitution, where aspergillus is a more tubercular situation that has to do with lymphatic flow and structure and bone development. And those are the two basic foundational endobionts in our body. And then we have penicillium, which comes off of that, which is inflammation. So for those people, they have a lot of itises. I think of them as like nux vomica kind of patients. And so just important to kind of understand before you're going to think about detoxing yourself or detoxing a patient, to kind of have an idea of what's their constitution. And so if we look at miasms real quickly, we have the soric miasm, which is the miasm that effectively eliminates. So it's a centrifugal force, and it pushes toxins out. And I have that partying grandma up there because when I think of this, I think of the grandmother who's like 120 and she's chugging down her bourbon out of the bottle and smoking her Marlboros and rocking on her porch, and she's 120. She never gets sick because she knows how to eliminate. She just was born lucky. She was born with a good constitution. And so you'll see reactions like vomiting, diarrhea, and think about it. When you have a reaction like that, what is the normal, typical societal thing to do? Go get some over-the-counters, anti-diarrhea, stop the vomiting. We have a fever, let's get it down. And so it's really important to remember. And when I first started my practice in 2001, I had children of my own, and I was doing a lot of pediatrics. And you know, when my kids get sick, I just watch them. Let's get a fever, have your diarrhea. But you know, I had to really train my parents, patients of mine, because right away they want to reach for the Tylenol, they want to shut things down. And so here you have like this wonderful elimination, and we're taught to just suppress it. So that's party grandma. Then we have psychotic elimination, which is inefficient. It's the opposite. It's holding on to everything. So including emotions. And so that makes me think of this Zen story that I like. There's two monks. One is an elder monk, and one is like his young monk in training. And they're walking towards a river, and it's a very strong current, and they're going to have to cross the river. And there's this beautiful lady there, and she's like, you know, damsel in distress, has to get across the river. And, you know, the young monk looks at the old monk, and they've taken these vows not to touch a woman. And so the young monk's like, doesn't know what to do. And the old monk just picks up the woman, throws her across his back. Ooh, there goes the microphone. And carries her across the water, sets her down, and the two monks keep on walking. And the younger monk is like, what did he just do? He just touched the woman. Oh my God, I can't believe he did that. And they're walking for hours, and he's ruminating over this. I can't believe he did that. What about the vows? And finally, after about 4 or 5 hours, he gets up the courage to say to his older monk, his teacher, you know, why did you pick up that woman and carry her? What about our vows? And he said, I put her down at the end of the river. Why are you still carrying her 5 hours later? And so think about it. What do you carry in your life? What are the stories you're telling yourself, and what emotions are you holding on to? And so who haven't you forgiven? Who are you angry at? Because these things are very real. They're just as real as the mercury we were just talking about. They're just as real as glyphosate, which is epidemic and prevalent everywhere in our food. And so it's really important to think about the mind-body and to have communication. And I'll share a quick personal story with you because maybe that'll inspire you to make a connection in your own life. So my dad just recently passed away, and I moved my mom out to Arizona to be with me, not living with me, but living nearby. And I've been seeing her a couple of times a week. But I started to feel guilty. I started to tell myself stories that the other kids whose parents are in the independent living see their mother every day, and, you know, I'm a bad daughter, and that, you know, if I'm busy working, I don't have time to talk to my mother, and I have to cut her short on the phone, that she gets upset with me even though she says it's okay. And I started telling myself all these stories. I'm a bad daughter. I'm carrying around all this guilt. I'm feeling bad about my relationship with my mother. And mind you, this is just all in my head. And so finally, I decide I need to move this out because it's not healthy to carry toxic emotions, not healthy to walk around feeling guilty. So I went to the woman who runs the place, and I said, you know, I hear that all these kids come and visit on Sundays, and because I have a strange schedule, often I can't make it to visit on Sunday. And she said, oh, well, a lot of the kids just come on Sundays. and maybe they only come once a month. She said, you're coming 2 or 3 times a week. You're like a superstar. And I was like, oh, that's good to know, because I wasn't thinking that. And then I went and talked to my mother, and I said, this is how I'm feeling. And I just had an open conversation with her. And what I realized was that a lot of it was in my head. My mom was like, I'm so grateful for what you're doing. I know you're busy. Whenever you can see me, that's great. And it like took all this emotion and this negative energy that I was holding on to and not eliminating, and it just poof, went away. And so I'm sure each and every one of you sitting here, if you really get honest, can think of a situation where maybe you're holding on to a toxic emotion. And so I invite you, an invitation, when you leave the conference, to make a call, write that letter, to move the emotion and let it move through your body so that it's not dragging you down. Paradoxical healing is another form of psychotic elimination. So these are the patients, who react totally opposite than you think they're gonna. You give them valerian to put them to sleep, and they're wide awake. And so just another key, if that's who you are, I find in my practice, because we see a lot of patients who can't get help elsewhere. So I see this quite commonly in my practice, because no one else knows how to help them, and so they end up on our doorsteps. Tuberculinic elimination is wimpy from Popeye. And it's inefficient, it's low energy. So it's the person who can't create a respectable fever. And maybe for them, if they're running at 99, that's like a really high fever for them, because they tend to have a very low temperature to begin with, which can be a sign of low thyroid function, low adrenal function. These patients will have chronic swollen glands. They just can't get the oomph to move things out, to create the fire. They're often demineralized, they're very emotional. Tuberculinic, a common thing is the grass is always greener, so whoever's doing something else, that's where they want to be. They love to travel, and they're demineralized, so you want to make sure you're checking your patients for minerals. And there's lots of different ways to do that. You can do it through bioenergetic testing. I use muscle testing. You can use blood work, which is something that I do. So for example, like magnesium, so forth. You want to make sure you're checking like zinc, all these minerals. My hair in the way? You want to make good? You want to make sure if you're checking things like this, that you're checking them in the red blood cells if you're doing blood work. A lot of these things like magnesium, potassium, zinc, they hang out in the red blood cells. So if you're just checking serum levels, you're not getting the whole story. Luetic elimination is yet another ineffective eliminator. So you see out of the 4 miasms, 3 out of 4 are ineffective. Just the first one was effective. Here they're not in tune with the flow of nature. They destroy themselves, they destroy their tissues, their emotions, they let everything get to them. And so it's really important to be in the flow of nature. With artificial lighting, even just today, I haven't even been outside yet today. I haven't breathed fresh air or touched the grass or anything. And so in your lives and in your patients' lives, it's really important to drive this home. I started to say this before when we were doing our panel, but we get so caught up with what remedy am I going to take, and what lab test are you going to do, and what's the diagnosis you're going to give me. And it's like we forget about the really important things. And so getting in tune with nature, how many of you just wake up and the first thing you do is grab your cell phone, and there you are on email, checking Facebook, Instagramming, all of these things, instead of getting outside, watching a sunrise. And then you go to work all day and you're inside all day. Do you even bother to take a lunch break? And if you do you get outside, or do you take it at your desk, eating while you're on computer, looking at Facebook again, looking at your email again? And then you come home and you go in and you eat dinner and you watch TV, and it's like, where's nature in this? And maybe on a Saturday afternoon when you have your day off, you decide to take a walk at the beach if you're lucky enough to live by the ocean, or take a walk in the woods, or sit in your backyard. And that's just not enough. we need nature daily, optimally multiple times a day. And so, you know, everything starts with ourselves, you know, if you're a practitioner. So it's really important to practice what we preach. I'm a very big proponent of that. So if I ask people to do something, it's because I'm doing it in my own life. So take a little nature inventory and see what's your daily dose of nature. Where are you getting it? How are you getting it? And if you're not getting it, what are you going to do to start getting it? So now we're going to talk a little bit about another way to look at your constitution. So like I said in the beginning, there's many different roads. They all lead home. So this is just another way to be familiar with. Maybe this speaks to you. I started practicing and learning about Ayurveda, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So it wasn't something I did initially, but I just love it. It's very poetic, and it really works, and it's very simple and in tune with life, and it's very old and time-tested. So not everything has to be double-blind, placebo-proved to work. And so we have the different doshas. We have vata, which is light, cold, dry, changeable. Vata people are typically like tall and skinny. They're very scattered. It often has a lot to do, they'll have nervous system issues, dry skin, constipation. And someone who's vata, because they're so cold, doesn't do good with raw food. Or so when you're thinking about detoxing and you're like, oh, well, you're going to do a raw food cleanse, or you're going to do juicing. Like someone who's vata, that's not a good thing for them. Like they need their apples stewed, not raw. They need their vegetables steamed, not raw. And so again, just to kind of bring to you like the individuality. Not everything is good for everyone. It's finding what works for you and your constitution. Then we have Pitta. Oh, and Vata, I didn't say. Vata is like air and ether. Those are the elements. Then we have Pitta, which is fire and also water. And so Pitta is hot, it's sharp, it's oily, it's spreading. It's people who are Pitta often have red hair. They're athletic, they're muscular, and they can be very, I think of like Nux Vomica, because they're very success and type A driven. So I'm an ex-Pitta. I had to de-Pitta myself from that. And so they can get irritated, they can get angry, they get ulcers, they have burning, they can have rashes. And so with someone who's Pitta, they may be very like, oh, I read about this detox and I have to do it and I have to do it this way. And they can be very like anal about it and orientated about it. And for them, it's about like listening to their bodies. They can be very detached from their bodies. And so for them, cleansing may be just another thing to, like a to-do, to check off their list. And again, that can be creating more toxins than not. So important to recognize if someone has that driven personality, maybe for them, you know, just getting them to be in tune with their body and nurture themselves and listen to their body can be the greatest detox for them of all. And then we have Kapha, and Kapha is earth and water, and Kapha is heavy and slow, and it's dull and it's smooth, and Kapha people tend to be heavy, they have solid frames, they have big, beautiful eyes that you can just get lost in. They have very round faces. And Kapha imbalances tend towards like fatigue and weight gain. They have a lot of mucus. But they're like these Mother Earth people. You just see them. My youngest son is a Kapha, and I call him my Kapha bear because you just love him, and he's just big, and you just want to hug him, and they're very sweet. And that's what a Kapha-type personality is. And so for Kapha people who really get mucusy and have all that extra weight on them, spring, which happens to be the time of Kapha during the year, is a good time for them to do some cleansing because they have a lot of excess accumulation, and it's really beneficial to help them cleanse. And so Amma is the underlying cause of disease, and toxicity in all 3 doshas. So in Ayurveda, we call toxins Amma. And so there are 3 types of Amma. There's heavy and sticky Amma, which is due to poor dietary habits. Then there's Amavisha, which is more toxic, and that's mixing with the doshas and the tissues, the waste products of the body. And so that's more endogenous issues in the body, metabolic byproducts that we are intoxicating, self-intoxicating ourselves. And then we have Garvisha, and excuse my pronunciations, I'm not a Sanskrit master. And that's a bioaccumulation of environmental toxins, which we've been talking a lot about. And so how does it form? Well, according to Ayurveda, there's the mistake of the intellect. So not eating according to our true level of hunger or digestive power. So seeing what's harmful as useful. And so for those of you who came to how many of you came to my workshop yesterday? And a number of you. So you're already ahead of the game. You know all about mindful eating. And so this is another thing about really, when we eat, thinking about what we eat and not eating until we are full and can't move. Because if you just eat till you're about 60, 75% full, and then you stop eating, what you'll notice typically is in like 15, 20 minutes, you're satiated and you're full. And then if you're not, then go back and have seconds. But we have a habit of just eating and eating until we're so full, and then we push ourselves away from the table and we can't move. And many of us may have grown up with, our mother saying you have to clean your plate, but I promise your mom won't know you don't have to clean your plate. So eat for health, don't eat. I grew up with a father who grew up in the Depression, and he couldn't see anything left on a plate. And so instead of letting food go into the garbage, he made his body a garbage disposal and would just eat everything because he had that Depression mentality. So that's, the mistake of the senses, or the mistake in timing, ignoring the seasons. So another way to really keep your body healthy and detoxify is to eat according to the seasons. So I split my time between New York and Arizona. And yes, I do Arizona in the winter and New York in the summer. And so I would never be in New York in the winter. And I lived many, many years, spent many, many winters in New York. And I would never in the winter eat salads, drink smoothies, because you're putting cold foods into a body that's already in a cold environment. So you really want to think about eating according to the seasons. So when I'm in Phoenix, if it's 120 degrees, yes, smoothies or fresh juice or raw salads, great thing to do. But if you're in a cold environment and it's 20 degrees out, then you want to think about stir-frying your food, doing stews, soups, and things of that nature, because it's going to really help with your digestion. So what are some signs and symptoms of Amma? Plaque buildup in the vessels. And so plaque buildup is not a deficiency of pharmaceutical drugs. So there are other things to think about. So always going back to your diet and what you're eating and how you're eating it and why you're eating it. So other signs of Amma are feeling heavy, lethargic, lazy, a lack of strength, having gas, bloating, indigestion issues, constipation, diarrhea, excess mucus, and no flow in your life. And so I was really excited today because there was a gluten-free chocolate cake for dessert at lunch, and so I did eat that, and unfortunately, chocolate is a major issue in forming Amma. So according to Ayurveda, chocolate really is a big contributor. So it's not, it's what you do most of the time, and so I think it's really about balance. So if you're eating chocolate cake every day for dessert, maybe not so good. But if you do it once in a while, and you do it in joy, and you don't feel guilty about it, because guilt is not very digestible. So I spoke about this yesterday briefly at my workshop, and it's really the energy with which you eat. So if you're an anxious neurotic eating broccoli and salmon and you're gobbling it down and you're worried and you're not feeling good about it, Or if you're like really cool and centered and enjoy, and even if you're having a Big Mac at McDonald's, you're probably going to extract more joy and nutrition out of your Big Mac. And I am not a proponent of McDonald's, so don't mistake me here. But it's how you do things. And so if you're going to eat the piece of chocolate cake, eat it with joy and really enjoy every bit of it. And then just know, you have a little more Amma build up, and you're going to have to kind of account for it in the future and do some things to detox. So some of these we talked about already. How do you eliminate Amma? You don't overeat. You wait till the previous meal is digested. And so really good to eat 3 meals a day. Give your hormones and your insulin time to do what they need to do if you're eating 3 meals a day. I'm not a really big fan anymore. I used to be more a big fan of grazing, but I think it's better to eat this way. No cold drinks. So we'll talk a little bit later about hydration, but it's really important to drink your drinks room temperature. And don't drink with your meals. If you're going to swallow some vitamins, that's fine. But mainly, you should drink an hour before your meals or a couple of hours after. Make sure you're eating pure, fresh food. So like if you leave your food out and after 2 hours it hasn't spoiled, it's probably not pure, fresh food, probably shouldn't be going in your body. Eat mindfully. Those of us know we had our experience with our raisins, and I talked about it yesterday, but eating mindfully can be a wonderful tool to get you in touch with your food. It's something that I prescribe often for patients, especially those who are looking to lose weight. And often just by eating mindfully, you eat slower, you chew your food better, you get better digestion, and weight will effortlessly come off without even doing anything else. So eat when calm. Don't eat like this when you're at the counter or standing there. Sit down and eat. If you're busy and rushing, and I know those of you who have busy practices, often you're just trying to grab something in between patients. So I would just, often when I had my clinic in New York, they would give me a lunch break, and I would never end up having a lunch break because there'd be an emergency and a patient would have to be squeezed in. And so I just said to the patient, I'm eating lunch now, and I would eat in front of the patient. You have to take care of yourself. And so I'd ask them if they wanted anything, if they were hungry, but I would eat because it's really important to feed yourself, to eat slowly, to sit down, not to eat in your car, not to eat while you're watching the news or staring at the newspaper, but just to really be with your food. Your food is your gas. It's what nourishes you, and we tend to be very disconnected from it. Eating the heaviest parts of the meal first, making sure, like, if you eat fruit, that you eat it first on an empty stomach. If you eat like a heavy meal, and then often we go, oh, well, I'm going to have a healthy dessert, I'm going to have some fruit. But eating fruit after a meal causes a lot of fermentation. The fruit can't get digested, and you have a lot of problems. The only fruit that I kind of say is okay after a meal is pineapple, because it has the bromelain in it and it's good for digestion. I guess you could say the same for papaya. I just don't eat papayas much. So lunch should be your main meal, and that's very different. We're a very big dinner society, and so a lot of our social activities go around dinner time. And so, but really lunch being the main part of the heaviest meal of the day, that's when our digestive fire, or our Agni is called in Ayurveda, is at its strongest. And so eating a heavy lunch, you have more time to digest it. And then eating lighter for dinner and making sure that 3 hours before bed that you stop eating. So it's like put the lock on the fridge, lock the kitchen, and you're done. By 7 o'clock, if you have a typical 10 o'clock bedtime, you should be finished eating. Meditation, exercise, also important for eliminating Amma. So other things to digest Amma, you can sip hot water throughout the day. Really good to start your day with warm water with lemon to just get things cleansing. You can do scraping, sipping hot water, spices. You can use fennel, coriander, cumin. You can make a nice tea and just sip on that throughout the day. Using ginger, pepper. You need to increase the digestive fire if your digestion is low. And then doing panchakarma is like the big deal in Ayurveda if you want to go for a couple of weeks and do saunas and do enemas and have things stuck up your nose and all sorts of fun. It's a really great technique to just really cleanse Amma if you have a serious condition going on or just looking for prevention. So that was kind of like my constitutional, just to give you some ideas, whether it be Ayurveda, whether you'd be looking at the homeopathic miasm. And now I'm going to kind of switch gears a little. And I have a list here of factors involved in the terrain, and I'm just checking the time. So we still have a little bit of time. So these are things when we're looking at the biological terrain, the extracellular matrix, things that we've been talking about all weekend long, that are important. And so we have pH balance, making sure we have proper pH where we should. You can test this in the saliva, your pHs, if you want to know your mineral balance. If you want to look at the pH of the body, you can do urinary pH, and it's important to do more than one urinary pH. Your pH in the morning when you wake up should be acidic as you're cleansing from the night, and then doing some throughout the day during your alkaline tides after you eat, maybe about 10 a.m., maybe about 2 p.m., taking some other ones, and then averaging them through the day to see what your pH is. Looking at mineral balance, we talked about that a little, fatty acid balance, hydration, systemic drainage. So obviously we want to make sure that the extracellular matrix and the lymphatics are flowing because we need to be able to get things out, especially before we start putting things in. Nutrient uptake, the constitution, your lymphatic flow. A good easy test, just quick to see lymphatic flow. You can put your patient's hands like this. You shouldn't be able to pull them apart. If you can, that means their lymph is congested, their upper lymph. Then you can take their leg and you can put it out like this, turn their toe inward, so medially. And if you can push down, that means their lower lymph is congested as well if they can't resist you. The emotional state we've talked about, good bacteria in the gut, so the microbiome is very big now and everyone's speaking about it. And so I do stool analysis testing on all my patients to see what's going on. Pretty much, you know, if no one has a balanced microbiome until they've been working on it. So we know the microbiome is affecting everything in our body, and so that's really important. Cellular communication, making sure the cells are communicating with each other. Toxicity level, epigenetics, so that's kind of a new field that has emerged, and so a reminder that our genes do not determine our destiny. We have our genetics, but we can change the expression of what they're doing. And so I have all my patients do like a 23andMe, although I'm not doing 23andMe anymore because they took away a big part of the SNPs without telling us. And so I use Bob Miller, Tree of Life. I don't know if any of you know him, but he's coming up with his own test, and he's a great guy and really smart in this area. And so I'll run my patients' levels, and it's just really good to see. It doesn't mean it's what's going on, but you can correlate what their genetic makeup is. Are they prone to not produce glutathione? Or, you know, do they have issues with the Fenton reaction and they're storing iron? How do they methylate? All of these important things, and then you can start to make changes to help support their body. And then we have autophagy and mTOR, which I'm going to talk a little bit about right now. So autophagy is a detox process your body undergoes to clean out damaged cells and regenerate new ones. There's a protein called P62 that activates and induces autophagy, and it's a key to improved lifespan. And so this protein senses reactive oxygen species and induces autophagy. And so autophagy means self-eating from the Greek, and so it's a way that we detox intracellularly. And it's kind of in balance. We look at mTOR because mTOR will inhibit autophagy. And so mTOR is building up, and autophagy is cleansing. And so, again, when we're taking things and nutrients, sometimes we want to be building up, and sometimes we want to be cleaning out. And so it's really important to think about these things, because if you look at what stimulates mTOR and inhibits autophagy, some of the things on here are things that we're probably doing with our patients, like 5-MTHF supplementation. And so we really need to think through these things and not just be throwing things at patients because it's the latest craze or it sounds good. And so some of these things, obviously, like dairy products. I mean, when we talk about food sensitivities, so I do a lot of food sensitivity testing. I do a lot of dietary counseling, and I work a lot with my patients' diets. I think it's one of the foundational things. And unless you're a baby cow, then dairy products really have no business in your body. You know, we don't see animals like cross species milking from other species. We're the only people, we're the only species who drink another's milk. And milk products, milk is made to grow baby cows, and baby cows grow really big. And so, you know, again, it's what you do most of the time, not all of the time. So if you find you can tolerate and you're not sensitive to dairy, and every once in a while you want to have some good, organic, rare dairy, I'm not like shaming you here. But for the most part, whether you test sensitive to it or not, it really has no place in our diet. Plastics are another huge issue, and I've been on this big thing with my patients just to get plastics out of our life, and they're everywhere. And so there's the basics of using reusable shopping bags and using glass containers and so forth. But here's another one, protein drinks. So yes, protein drinks, we use them a lot, and they build muscle, and they're for building us up. So that's fine and dandy if that's what your intention is. But if you're looking to clear out cellular debris, then you're going to be inhibiting autophagy, which is the mechanism that does it in the body. So just to have a consciousness around that. EMFs, major issue. So, you know, a big one I see is like everyone's sleeping with their phones like right next to them, and, you know, put your phone in the other room or put it on airplane mode, but please don't be, you know, bombarding yourself while you're sleeping. And I just got this cool bracelet from Kelly, what's called the Shizi. And so you should totally check them out from her. That's one of the reasons I love coming here, is because like we all learn from each other. And you know, I know these are great practitioners, so like if she says it works, then I don't have to go do all the research. I can just go, awesome. So I've got this on, and it protects from all EMFs, from the computer, from the cell phone, and so I'm going to start selling them to my patients. So she knows more about it than I do, so you should talk to her. But it's a really important thing, you know, all these toxins, some of them we see, but a lot of them we don't. And the ones that are invisible, see my warning, the ones that are invisible are really, really detrimental. Pesticides, iron-enriched foods, MSG, glutamine is another one, so don't be so quick to give glutamine. There's other ways to heal the gut. Bone broth, which is a big thing now. So again, if you're looking to build, and sometimes I have patients doing like mTOR days and then autophagy days, and so, but we know what we're doing, so we know we're either building up or cleansing, because isn't that what life is about? It's about balance. We need to cleanse and we need to build up. Too much of either is not a good thing. Looking at glucose and insulin levels, looking at IGF-1, so those are things you can look at in the blood work. And so what stimulates autophagy? Intermittent fasting, which is a great tool to teach your patients, and basically, you know, it's eating all your meals, say between like 11 and 7, and so your body is then going into fast because stress stimulates autophagy. So when we were like stressed out and in famine, that would stimulate autophagy. So we're kind of telling the body that we're a little stressed out in famine by eating our meals all at the same time. And you can start the morning with bulletproof coffee, So then you're getting some good fats, so you're not hungry, especially for women who do intermittent fasting. They can tend to have some hormonal issues and so on, so that's a good thing to do. And I was never, ever a coffee fan. Like, I would, like, you're going to be a patient of mine, you were going to take coffee out of your life, because there's a lot of detriments with coffee. But we also now know that coffee has benefits. And if you do it bulletproof style, and you're getting the ketones with it, and you're getting the Kerrygold grass-fed butter, I think there are a lot of benefits. And if you're just doing 1 cup a day, again, it's all about moderation and doing things in balance, then you could do a cup of bulletproof coffee in the morning, and then do your intermittent fasting. Other things that stimulate autophagy, you can read, oops, did not mean to do that. Where's my little, there it is. So turmeric, vitamin D, so vitamin D should be measured in the blood. You can look at the 25-OH. You can also look at the 125, which I find if it's elevated, there's often a mycoplasma or mold issue, mycotoxins, so I look at both of them. You want to have your vitamin D levels high. The range is like 25 to 100, which is a ridiculous range. How could you be healthy at 25 and healthy at 100? That's a very big range. And so I like to have my patients up around 70. If they're a cancer patient or an autoimmune patient, I push them even higher, 90, 100. I've never really seen any detriments of high vitamin D and toxicity levels. Sulforaphane is from broccoli sprouts, so that's a supplement I like to use with my patients a lot. I use one from Zymogen called Oncoplex. That's the exact one they used in the studies at Johns Hopkins. I like that one a lot. It works really good. Using green tea to stimulate autophagy, coconut oil, reishi mushroom, ginger, melatonin. So you want to make sure when you're sleeping to stimulate melatonin that you are in a dark room. And so most people do not sleep in a dark room, so whether you need to get blackout shades or you need to get, there's a great company online I like called Perpetual Shade, and they have these really nice silk eye masks, so I'll recommend those for patients a lot. But you really need to be sleeping in the dark. So some of the benefits of autophagy: clears cellular debris, pathogens, extends your lifespan, prevention of cancerous development, prevents neurodegenerative disease, reduces inflammation, enhances muscle performance, and decreases infection. So how about that? Pretty cool. What else do you need? How am I doing on time? So does that mean 5 more minutes? So we'll talk about hydration, because I am a hydration crazy person, and so it's like one of my favorite soapboxes about being hydrated. I can't tell you how many patients I see, and whether they're constipated or fatigued or they have asthma or whatever's going on with them, and they don't want to believe me that if they just get hydrated, their symptoms and their issues may go away. And they want a pill, they want it to be natural, but they don't want to drink water, and they come up with all these excuses like, I'm going to have to go to the bathroom all the time if I drink water. And that's not an okay excuse. I mean, that's how our body works. And having to urinate, you know, every couple of hours, how long does it take you to urinate? Like 15 seconds? So, you know, you can't have excuses around these things. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about doing basic lifestyle things. And so I'm not going to give you something to help you if you don't want to help yourself. And that means taking self-responsibility. And so you need to take hydration seriously. And so you should not be drinking out of plastic. Your water needs to be filtered. And there's my guy in the back, the filter man. So you should definitely go check him out. He's in the exhibit hall. I got to meet him yesterday, and he's got great pre-filters and the newest and greatest Ionizer. And so when you're drinking the ionized water, then you're actually getting antioxidants, and you're getting water that's microclustered, so your water is actually getting absorbed. And so I used to do a lot of biological terrain assessment testing with urine and saliva, and I would test my patients, and even if patients were drinking the amount of water I told them to drink, if they weren't drinking the ionized water, I saw they weren't as hydrated as the patients who had gotten an Ionizer. So make sure it's at room temperature. We talked about that already. The minimum is half your body weight in ounces. But really, I like you to drink 3 liters. So, you know, if you're only drinking 30 ounces today, don't go from 30 to 90 overnight, but work your way up using some Himalayan salt or Celtic sea salt in it to help you mineralize so you actually retain the water. It's not enough to just drink the water. We want to make sure it's getting into your body and your cells and that you're getting hydrated. If you don't like the taste of water, you can add lemon, you can add mint, you can add berries, you can add whatever you want, and measure it. So this is just one of my pet peeves. It's like if you don't measure your water in the morning, so the first thing I do when I wake up is I get out my 2 glass bottles, I fill it with water from my Ionizer, and then I know that's my job for the day to drink the water. And I try and get it done before 5 or 6 o'clock, because I don't want to be up all night peeing because sleep is sacred. And so it gives me an idea of how much I'm drinking, because if you don't measure, you're just going to get busy, you're not going to drink it, and you're not going to get hydrated. And so I have a prescription pad because in Arizona where I practice, naturopathic physicians were able to prescribe, and I never use it. I've treated very serious illnesses from chronic disease to acute issues, and I never use my prescription pad because I use the tools of biological medicine to treat my patients. But what I do use my prescription pad for is to write drink water, go play in the mountains, go take a hike, hug your dog, because those are the prescriptions that are really, really important, and I like to drive that home. So I am told I have to finish because it's time, so I'm going to stop here. And if anyone, do I have time for questions? I have a couple of minutes if anyone has a question. Well, since you don't have a question, I'm going to give a shout out to the Baden-Baden tour. So I don't know if I've been at the table where Kimchi is doing her testing, and I just want to cordially invite you all. Kimchi and myself will be your hosts, and I promise it's going to be an amazing time on every level. So if you're interested, we're going to be doing a guided tour to Baden-Baden for Medicine Week, which I can tell you transformed my practice by going over to Germany and learning everything that's going on there, bringing back the tools that they use there, getting connections for remedies, that it's just something I think if you haven't done it, it's a must-do. We only have 30 spaces. So if you're interested, please make sure you see either myself or Kimchi so we can secure a spot for you. We're going to be visiting the Hallwang Clinic in the Black Forest, which is a cancer clinic. We're going to be going to Dieter Jasner's lab, which is like more far out than anything you've seen in your life. Just that alone is worth coming for. We're going to have private English lectures at our hotel. We've got a great lineup for you. We're going to be spending time at Medicine Week. We're going to be going to the baths. So I really, really hope that you'll seriously consider it, because it can just take your knowledge, take your practice to the next level. So I hope that you'll join us, and I thank you for your attention.